Clown. Okay. So I'll just do a, well, Yuvraj dropped it. He can join back. Let me just do a slate here at the top. This is just a walkthrough of Cluster API, vSphere, v1 Alpha 2. And this will be uploaded to the Kubernetes YouTube channel. So if you don't want to have your face or voice advertised on YouTube, drop now, please. And general guidelines are just don't be a jerk. Beyond that, you should be good. Let me close this. Okay. Make sure I'm logged in here still. Okay, cool. All right, so yesterday, the v1 Alpha 2 changes merged that should make this work, and I did just test it, and it does work, at least the initial control plane nodes. Now, I didn't do exhaustive testing. We still need to re-enable E to E, but getting the initial control plane node up works, which, you know, was more than it did 2 days ago. So this was the big commit that brought us home. Like I said, Yuvraj did all the initial hard work here, and I just sort of layered on some dumb stuff. Just FYI, there will be some stuff that is dropped out of this that is currently specific to v1 Alpha 2. So for example, let me show you the getting started guide. It makes a note of this. All of the images currently in master point to this prefix. And so how do we get those images? Well, I created a script called build dev that this can be removed once we actually have real images. But when I run that, it basically builds CapV from the working branch and then builds the CAPI manager and CAPI bootstrap provider for kubeadm from their upstream master branches, and it uploads them to those URLs. And so our current generate script that we use to generate manifests also points to those images. So we'll need to update all of that post v1a2, but it's just how I've been keeping images updated, and so other people can do testing. I guess the getting started document is the best place to start. As you can see, we do note those changes. So one of the big changes is that we no longer include, so they have that there, but they don't have the artifact instructions. This will be removed. You will no longer include instructions for building cluster cuddle, but rather you'll download it from the cluster API releases page. I included it here because they weren't publishing pre-release artifacts yet, so you can still use this to build it. But to be very clear, the same version of cluster cuddle in v1 Alpha 2 works for all providers. So, because all it did before was bundle that deployer interface, so it knew how to get the kube config and how to get the control plane endpoint, and those are now no longer necessary to get per provider, or it's handled differently. Our machine images are backwards compatible, so we are still using the same machine images we built for v1 Alpha 1. Now, Andrew, yeah, you were actually on that call. We do have an open issue, and Yuvraj, I was going to speak to you today. Again, there's a lot of stuff to clean up for v1 Alpha 2, but I'm hoping that you can actually work on the issue that we reopened last week for this to include in our 042 release, so that if we build new images based on the upstream image builder that no longer use the forked version of Cloud Init, that they will still work for v1 Alpha 1. Last thing about v1 Alpha 1 specifically, Andrew Saikim, I'm going to open a PR today that is actually based on some work that you did. You confused me yesterday quite a bit because I was up pretty late working with our Beijing office. She was working, and Nilu was doing some v1 Alpha 1 work, and I couldn't understand why what she was trying to do wasn't working. And I said, well, I know it works that way in v1 Alpha 1. I forgot we never actually committed that 031. So I'm going to open this for 042. It will support the custom CRI socket. It includes your original change and then the change that Andy had mentioned to you as what they did for Kappa. It'll default to container D unless it's overridden. because turns out Kubernetes 113 doesn't do auto select. That only started with 114. And so I know some people are still using 113. So I'll open that today. That's the last V1 Alpha 1 specific thing, unless we come back to it. So generating YAML for V1 Alpha 2 hasn't dramatically changed. We still have the same process. Some files are different. We have cluster YAML, control plane YAML. This used to be the old machines.yaml. Machine deployment, that might have been called machine set, I forget. Provider components and add-ons YAML. Now, I'll generate the YAML here in a second, but it's the same EN vars type situation. Notice that you get a warning now. This will include vSphere credentials. So we can actually display all of these files, but don't display this one if you've got if you are doing a video. So let's actually take a real quick look at what.
Sorry, quick question.
Yes.
Actually, no, yeah, never mind. I'll wait till you show the provider components.
All right, so let's generate the YAML here. So let me open up my Quiver here. So I'm going to export an environment variable called cluster name. It's just what I'm using in some of my scripts here. So I'm sourcing the env vars because it, actually I don't need to do that. Yeah, I don't need to do that because that was just to give me the ability to do a go vc destroy later. Okay. So I'm just making sure I remove the old out directory. We do a Docker run, same situation. So what are these values? Before I run this, I'm going to just do a generate, it's actually examples. So you now have the ability to set the log level of the different managers as well as the manager images. It's just something I added for V1A2. It defaults to 4 on each of them. So if the CAPI manager image is lowercase p, log level is capital P. I'm using the built-in get op, so which is why I don't have long arguments, but anyway. So we'll generate them. Okay, so if we take a look here at V1A2, our cluster should be pretty straightforward. We've got the CAPI cluster and we've got the vSphere cluster, right? And then let's take a look at this is more interesting, control plane. It's just my public key. Okay, so the first thing first, it shows the kube-adm config because customize reorders it based on kind value, I guess. There's a hack here, and they are fixing it for the V1A2 release and upstream bootstrap provider. We'll fix it post V1A2 on CapV. By the way, we'll probably release 0.50 today, Andrew. We won't do a beta just because it'll be in sync with what they're doing, and then we'll have to do like a 0.51 or something. Just we want to be in sync with them. Anyway, so there's a bug that they are fixing for the upstream bootstrap provider, where if you included files, Yuvraj, they were always implicitly or explicitly base64 encoding additional files, which meant it wasn't interpolating the Jinja template, so I had to do commands. Additionally, notice that we have this user called capv. In V1 Alpha 1, since we made our own cloud init, there was a key called SSH authorized keys, and it would just add any keys to the default cloud init user, which happened to be Ubuntu or CentOS, depending on the machine image. They don't have that in the Bootstrap provider. They do allow you to add users. So now what we'll do is our default user on these systems will be capv. And so if you specify an SSH key, you'll just log in with the capv user, and it automatically gives you sudo. And it currently does default to, the examples default to containerd.sock. So, and then we have our CAPI machine, and we have our our vSphere machine. Oh, notice it's no lock. For anybody working for VMware on the call and uses VMC, there is a vSphere template that I deployed that ends in -no lock that does not lock the user's password, since I was encountering some issues. I swear originally I saw that they were not base64 encoding the bootstrap data, and it was supposed to be plain text string. Yesterday, I was swearing it was being double encoded, and sure enough, somebody verified that that changed. So I couldn't figure out first what was breaking us, then what. But yeah, this will just be whatever your VM template is. So yeah, this is the control plane file, and then finally we've got the machine deployment. Truthfully, I haven't done a whole lot of testing with this. The testing that I did do wasn't exactly successful, but it was because I applied it 3 times and it put it in error and then deleted it off. It did get created, but then it got deleted. So Cappy deleted it because the machine got marked in error. But notice something here. We've got what are templates. So we've, instead of a kubeadm config, we have a kubeadm config template. Instead of a vSphere machine, we have a vSphere machine template. And I've gone over this in other calls, but these templates are supposed to be immutable. And so while this is actually the virtual machine template inside of vSphere, so for example, if we go here, you'll see this is a VM template. We all know what that is, right? But we might have multiple versions of this. So, and then they should be considered immutable. So let's call it, cube 113.6 large, and num CPUs might be 16, and this might be tiny. And so num CPUs is 2, right? And so these are supposed to be immutable, or we're supposed to treat them immutably. Same with the kubeadm config templates, because if you update those and base new machine deployments on them, the new machine deployments will pick the changes up, but the existing ones won't. So again, even though we have this template field inside of our machine spec, this is the virtual machine template. And then this is the immutable configuration for a machine we want to deploy. Does that make sense? Good. So I kind of like it. It's kind of like instance types. Okay, I'm not going to open up provider components on the call because, well, it has passwords in it.
Okay, okay. So let me go to my question then earlier.
Yeah.
So is provider components, like, are the secrets embedded into like into the stateful specs and stuff like that, or is it like all in a secret? I'm wondering like this, if we can just pull it out into a separate file so that we don't have to warn on.
So that's interesting. So yes, the answer to your question, I believe, is yes. So let's do this. I want to show you the help for this. So cluster cuddle in v1.8.2 does have this new bootstrap only components, a YAML file just for the bootstrap cluster. So there's the potential to put it in there. And then, by the way, in v1.8.2, the pivot functions by looking at the graph, the resource graph, starting with the Cappy cluster. As long as owner refs are set appropriately, it will pivot every resource related to that entire graph with the Cappy cluster at the top. So our secret could be owned by the Cappy cluster, and then that would get pivoted. So we could inject it into the bootstrap cluster using this file, Andrew, and then the pivot would take care of adding it to the permanent cluster. So it would not be part of provider components.
Gotcha, okay.
So by the way, the way it works today, and I always forget this. So we've got our manager credentials patch. Okay. It is being, so we have our manager, where is it, credentials. So there's this secret, and these are these are environment variables that get interpolated when we do the generate, right? In fact, if you look at the examples generate, you'll see where I think I do that. Yeah, it just exports these as environment variables and then unsets the originals. But it basically just adds a secret, and then our credentials patch patches it in as the environment variable, and v1.8.2 checks those environment variables. Doug McCachran, who's the project lead and one of the founders of GoVMommy, has said that he's looking into adding something similar to the AWS facility where it will check like a standard credentials file, even at the GoVMommy library level, so that we can, instead of doing environment variables, just mount a file out of the secret. For now, this is how, Yeah, this is how it's happening. All right, so yeah, okay. Does that answer your question there about the provider components? Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy this now. So that's doing a few things. One of the reasons I sourced that environment variables file is because I can use it to ensure that if I've got an existing node, it gets destroyed, it does a delete cluster. By the way, notice this new argument I give it in my example, bootstrap flags. Why is that? Because Yuvraj and I found out something. In cluster codel v1 alpha 2, the kind cluster is no longer cluster API. It's cluster API dash random junk. And the problem is it makes it really hard to write nice scripts that will follow things for you when you're testing. If you set bootstrap flags name equals, it will create the kind cluster with a deterministic name. So that's why I'm doing that. So we're going to go ahead and run this. Takes a bit to get started. While I'm doing that, I'm going to export these over here. Go ahead.
So is the bootstrap flag something we custom added to cluster cuddle, or?
No, that's part of cluster cuddle v1a2.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. Yep. If we look, I should be here. So cluster cuddle create. Yeah, we don't. I can actually probably get away with removing Cappy from our vendor. Like right now, part of v1a2 was we introduced this go.vendor file, which literally all it does is when we do update vendor, it loops over items in that file and make sure that we add any, we take the whole directory from them. But we don't build cluster cuddle out of vendor at all. So we can probably even get rid of that. We're the only reason we're building cluster cuddle currently is because we need it for development. So it's running. Let me go ahead and follow stuff over here. So this is for following cap V. This is for following cap E. And then this will be to, it's up and running. So get all, there used to be a shortcut for that. Okay, so it's starting everything up.
Capital A, dash capital.
Yeah, but they got rid of it, I'm pretty sure. No, okay, I thought maybe it used to be dash capital N or something. Thank you. Anyway, yeah, so it's standing everything up. We should start seeing data here. So here's where it starts to get, very familiar, right? So this is Cappy. And so you can start to see like, hey, it could not retrieve status API endpoints. Well, it's because we don't have a node yet. So that's the thing that's interesting for us. In every other provider, infrastructure ready is sort of married to the notion of there being API endpoints. And Kappa, if infrastructure ready, it means their load balancer has been created, which means they have a control plane endpoint. And that was the last change they merged this morning in Cappy before the release. It was for us. It was a PR I wrote where infrastructure ready does not mean that you have an API endpoint. So what happens in Cap V, in a normal reconciliation, the first thing the cluster does is say reconcile API endpoints. If there's stuff already set, great. If not, it actually gets the machines in the cluster, gets the control plane machines, and checks to see if one of them has an IP address. If it does, it sets that as the API endpoint. If not, returns an error. So upstream, what Cappy is actually doing, we can actually see it here. What Cappy is actually doing in their reconcile infrastructure, they check to see if infrastructure is ready, and then they say if there are no API endpoints, read them from the provider cluster's API endpoints, and then store them. And their kubeadm provider will do the job of, if there's no control plane endpoint defined, it will look to see if there's an API endpoint and will use that as the control plane endpoint. There's been a lot of discussion on whether or not to always sync this, to initialize it once. I think for the current release, the plan is that they stuck with this PR. It is initialized once, and I would have gone the route of reconcile, but CAPI tends to go the route of when infrastructure ready, it's supposed to be immutable. I don't necessarily agree because infrastructure can go down, and the plan moving forward is to always sync the API endpoints and then to regenerate the kube config if necessary, because the API endpoints could change. That's not part of this initial release though. So, but it works for CAPV. The thing is that the cluster upgrade tool is just not going to work for us. Not unless you have a known control plane endpoint in advance. There's no way they can make it work without that. So it's still running. What we can see here, if we do get machines, it's actually, oh, it shows us provisioned. So it did get provisioned, and let's do get clusters, kubectl, describe vSphere machines. It is provisioned. So we should actually see this start to fail soon because it's going to, yep, it's starting to pivot. So these that are following the bootstrap information is going to start to fail. Okay, that one started to fail. That's CAPI. So CAPV, yep, CAPV has started to fail. What we expect, it fails to follow those logs because it's currently doing the pivot from the bootstrap cluster to the target cluster. So here it's saying deleting provider components. And again, logging is turned up to 6 here. So, okay, so now what we can do is, where's my, I'll just do it over here. So export kube config equals out v182. Am I in the right directory? Yeah. It takes a second for that to stand up, I hope. I saw this the other day, and it was because I had a bad VM folder value. I think I said it correctly, but I don't know why it's in a crash loop back off at the moment. Oh, there it goes. Now it's running. Okay. So yeah, it did a successful pivot, and now we've got get machines. It's not NA phase anymore. Kubectl, describe machines. We got provider ID, everything. This is the bootstrap data that gets set by the kubeadm provider. But yeah, I mean, honestly, that's about as far as I got with a lot of the testing, because there was a lot to do to get there, and we're going to have to iterate after that. So at this point, though, in their getting started guide, we should be applying I should actually probably apply. Let's see what happens. This probably will fail here. Out v1 and then machine deployment. Get machines. Probably need to do machine deployments, which was interesting yesterday, again, because I did it like 10 times because I had a bad template. So that was why that happened. But I'm hoping, since there's not a bad template today, it just works. We should eventually see the machine show up. I'm not sure when it will. It did show up yesterday, but yeah, I don't know what's going on there. So get vSphere machines. That is a CAPI issue though, because we don't control whether or not it turns it into a machine. CAPI is controlling that. I don't know if we can see any evidence that it's not even provisioning one yet, but yeah, there's a provisioned system out there. So I think CAPI is probably still deciding what to do here. If we do describe clusters, where would we do for events? vSphere clusters. Yeah, I don't know why we're not seeing the machine pop up. I applied it on the provision system, Unless I just generated it wrong. But again, I mean, this is just something we're going to have to sort through. It looks correct, so not sure what's going on there. It might take a minute. Or I did do a kubectl apply, right? Machine deployments. Yeah. I'm not seeing any, so let's do machine deployments. No events, so this might be a CAPI issue. I'm not sure. I will check with them, but I knew we'd have to iterate on this. But it deploys the control plane, and that's it deploys the cluster, right? We have a working cluster, and whether or not why this is failing, I honestly don't know. It did work yesterday. It just would fail to finish deploying it. Anyone have any suggestions on what to check here? Like where to, this is interesting. This would probably be why. Well, that's not good. Huh. Well, get name. It looks like it's in us. Oh, wait, that's a cloud provider. Andrew, I'm going to send this to you.
Yeah, please do. I mean, this is 113, right? So I can't
Yeah.
imagine any big changes happening since then. So
No,
my guess is that the cloud provider might be misconfigured or something. But yeah, that's a little weird. Unless did you advance in the patch version, or are we still 113.6?
we're still 113.6, yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know why
Yeah, I can take a look.
that would be doing that. That's weird. It's get node name from provider ID.
It looks like it's a nil panic. So somewhere it's fetching. I think it's trying to look up a field that doesn't exist or something, or it's nil.
Yeah, I mean, it could have to do with the way the node ref manager is set. I don't know, but yeah, that would be.
Wait, can I see the provider ID on the control plane node?
Yes. So get nodes.
Yeah, -o wide.
I don't see the provider ID.
How can you do -o YAML? And scroll up. Right there.
By the way, we know it was set and marked correctly because otherwise it wouldn't have pivoted. The cloud provider has to work.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll take a look at it later.
Yeah. So this is new. I mean, I might try it with a newer version of Kubernetes and see what happens there. A different version of Kubernetes. But so yeah, that would be why it's not deploying that, because our controller manager is in a crash loop backoff. Interesting.
But so, I guess the interesting thing is like the controller manager doesn't actually, unless it's stopping like pods from running, everything's CRD based. So if the CAPV controller is, but then all the CAPV controllers pending. That's why. Okay, yeah, never mind.
Yeah,
that would explain it. Okay.
All right. Well, we'll figure this out. But okay, well, I'm sorry this didn't end on a better note, but the fact that it does the pivot, it means that it does deploy the cluster correctly, and then it may have to do with the reconciling the cloud config secret. And what we may end up finding out is that the cloud provider configuration on the target cluster may not be correct, and so for whatever reason, like it gets created correctly on we ended up doing. We even Where did we end up doing the cloud provider config? Oh, crap. Did we even do that in V1A2? Is it only working in the bootstrap provider because it doesn't need to be configured correctly? Because we're not adding that file.
It's very possible.
Yeah, I think we just, or I just completely didn't do the cloud provider. But
like I saw you set the flags, but I guess, yeah, like the file, like is the config file, is that in there?
Yuvraj, did you add that? No, you just did the host files. So, you know, that might be why. The fact that it gets this far is crazy to me.
Yeah. I'm actually looking through it right now. I can tell you in a second.
I don't think we do. I know I create the cloud provider secrets. No, because it used to be part of the user data. And so, yeah, it used to be part of the user data. Wait, do I do that or not? No, we need to add it as an additional file.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I actually remember asking this about.
I'm sure you did. You were always right, and I just miss it.
There was this question about if we have to use the bootstrap data as is or add some additional thing, and you said, yeah,
well, we can use the additional files.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to open a PR for, or I'll open a PR for that because I know what I need to do. Okay. So we'll open a PR for that. That's what's failing here. It's crazy it gets this far without the cloud provider.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good to know. I'll probably do that before I mark a V2, and I'll do a quick test on my own. All right. Thanks, everyone. Sorry I didn't on a better note, but we discovered the first bug. Thanks all. Bye.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Bye.